Welcome back. In this video, it's time to actually start messing around with the Sprite Manager. So what we're going to do is a little bit of prep work. The first thing that we need to do is we need to get another prefab all set up that is actually geared for working with the Sprite Manager. So what we're going to do is we're going to create a new game object. It's just going to be an empty game object. And I'm going to name this game object, let's see, I'm going to name this one just ball. Just like before, we're just going to put a couple of things in place. It's just a transform at the moment, and I'm going to zero it out, and we're going to add a couple of things to it. What we need to add for it is going to be a sphere collider, and we're going to need a physics rigid body. From there, we need to add a couple of things to it. What we're going to need to do is come up with the sphere collider. We're going to want this ball to be bouncy. So we're going to take our bouncy material and we're going to drag and drop that onto the material. The other thing we want to do is set the mass to 10 to be consistent with our other prefab. And that, I believe, is basically everything we need to do for the initial work of this prefab. So what we need to do is turn it into a prefab. So we're going to come down to the prefab folder. We're going to create a new prefab. We're going to name this prefab ball sprite manager. So I'm going to use SM for sprite manager prefab. So we've got a second prefab. And as you can see, it's gray because it's not actually a prefab yet. So I'm going to take the ball, I'm going to drag it down, I'm going to drop it on this prefab. So now I can delete this one. I've got this prefab. I can drag it up here so we can look at it. Now, if I zoom in on it, you can see it's pretty much empty. There's nothing in it. And the reason why is because we're using the Sprite Manager, so the geometry is going to be created at runtime via the Sprite Manager, the Sprite Manager script or the Link Sprite Manager, whichever we decide to use. So there is no geometry. We don't have any mesh renderer to render it. That's all going to be calculated dynamically. What we do have, though, is a sphere collider because we still need to interact with the level and we need to have it bouncy, so we've got the bouncy material. So with that, we've got the initial work for our sprite in place, and in the next video we're going to set up the Sprite Manager to take advantage of this. So I'll see you then.